when I started, so I'm just saying this to fill space just in case. Whew. All right. Hello everyone, Mr. Happy here, and in this video, I'm going to be discussing something that I have gotten, this question I've gotten a million times in the past couple of days. Is Sigmascape easier or harder than Deltascape? Now, I'm actually recording this live on Twitch, so it's going to be a bit of a janky video. You can see that I've got 5 different YouTube tabs up here. Each one is V1, oh 05, oh 06, oh 07 Savage. Then we have the first part of oh 08 Savage and the second part of oh 08 Savage. And I'm going to be just comparing them to their exact opposites in the Deltascape, comparing oh 05 to oh 01, etc., etc. So let's get started with the Phantom Train. I'm going to full screen it so you don't have to see all the YouTube stuff that's going on right there on the screen. It was stream footage, so it is what it is. So I'll just play it as I talk over it. So the Phantom Train is the first fight in Normal and Savage. Now, Phantom Train, I'll just say, I'll make the point real quick. I think it's a little harder than Alt-Roit. I don't think it's hard. I think that's a very important distinction to make. But one of the most important things about Phantom Train versus Alt-Roit is its enjoyability. It is an infinitely more fun fight without still really being one of those fights that kind of pushes you in any sort of way. I mean, the ghosts push you, but that's about it. It has some interesting things going on here, especially with the tank and the arena, the ghosts that can knock you off, the ghosts that act as walls, the aiming of the lights and making sure to get rid of the ghosts. It all comes together in a pretty fluid manner. There's very few things in this fight that feel like they weren't put together in a well thought out manner. There's lots of ways to maximize uptime on the boss. There's a great usability for things like arm's length, which you're actually going to see right now. And that's something that's going to be true for the entire raid tier. Last raid tier, things like arm's length and surecast were really good. In this one, they're also really good, but they're far more used than they were in the Deltascape. Overall, the only thing the Phantom Train for me has that's really, really weird, and I think if I skip ahead a little bit in the video, I'll be able to get to this point before I come back and talk about one of the mechanics we just saw right there, is definitely the train cars. So at about the halfway point, you have to kill a bunch of ads, and I think that's going to be right about here. So you have to kill a bunch of ads here. Now, this part of the fight doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I'm just going to assume that our DPS was high enough. We didn't see what can go wrong here. So basically, you have these passengers. 4 people get an AoE, and then the other 4 people get an AoE. And these passengers have, like, little box AoEs they do in front of them that can be really hard to see. But, like, this part of the fight just feels like, why did they still include this in Savage? Because you have to do something similar in Normal, and it just doesn't make any sense to me. This doesn't feel like something that even belongs in the fight. More so this right here. I don't understand this whole chimney thing. I have to assume if you kill the ghost too slow and you don't get to the chimney fast enough, it's something really bad. Because it never happened to us, and that's just how it is. But this chimney's got really low health, and nothing happens. You destroy it, Phantom Train takes a bunch of damage, and then you go into what actually feels like a Savage-worthy phase. You know, you have the 8 different ghosts. You know, you have 4 DPS ghosts, 2 tank ghosts, 2 healer ghosts, and this feels like, you know, okay, this is a decent modification from Savage. It's just I don't understand why even include the ads that come right before it, especially the chimney. It just it feels very much like I got warped back into normal mode, and that's it. So for all I can assume is that because it deals damage to the train, is that maybe it deals less damage to the train, or maybe you don't get the opportunity to defeat the chimney, and you end up basically having an extra 600,000 damage you have to deal to the train. I don't know, or if it does it like a giant AoE or something that's going to wipe the group. I don't know. It just doesn't feel... It feels like I got warped back into normal. It's really the only part of the fight I felt was super disjointed. The rest of it, I feel like, came together well enough. It was mostly worthy of the Savage title, and was a definite improvement over 01 Savage. So I'm glad to see some creativity with this boss, and I hope that for future first fights in the raid tier, we see something similar to the Phantom Train. You know, it doesn't need to be as unique. It doesn't need to be as, I guess, stand out-ish, but it should probably, within reason, you should be able to not look at this and go, what is this fight? Why is this Savage? Why would they bother? What is this crap? Which was basically the reaction to Alt-Roit, where it made no sense. It was literally normal mode with like 1 extra combination of stuff. And it just didn't come together. That includes the tank damage that was in that fight as well. So I just think that with the tank mechanic of getting out of range here and him constantly trying to knock you back and knock you around, it just comes together way better. So overall, O5 Savage, better than O1 Savage, I'd say by a fairly wide margin. So the next fight that we're going to talk about, and I'm going to get it on your screen here in a second, is O6 Savage. Now, I've had a lot of debates about this fight in particular. And the main debate is this the easiest fight in the raid tier? And I'm very close to saying yes, but I don't think it's easier than O5 Savage. Now, you're probably wondering how that's the case. You can see all the paints on the screen. I'll just start playing it. This was right after a wipe, so I'll just fast forward because there's kind of like a long intermission at the start of the fight. So in this fight, there's like a bunch of different paint colors on the ground, and you actually get auto-attacked by both the Demon Chatternook and the Goddess Chatternook. You can only kill the Demon one, but the Goddess one still auto-attacks your other tank. So because of that, that's something you need to consider. As a DPS, I don't consider it often enough when there's auto-attacks that have to be dealt with from multiple angles. It definitely adds a degree of difficulty to the fight that I think isn't considered when people look at a fight and go, wow, this is easier than this, or oh, this looks easier than that. It's not like it's insanely bad, it's just it adds a degree that isn't there in a lot of other fights. As for the rest of the fight, I think they didn't have creative enough ways to use the paint. What ends up happening about 99% of the time is everybody takes blue paint before the fight starts. By the way, for this little thing here, we just send a paladin in with hollowed ground, and we don't even have to do the cyclone AoE. I just point that out because if you have a paladin, you can do hollowed ground twice in the fight, and you can do it for both of those cyclones, so it's something worth considering. You basically grab the blue paint at the beginning, and you have the blue paint for like 50% of the fight as a DPS. I mean, actually, you have the blue paint for like 50% of the fight. So we're like, I don't know, just the way you bounce around using the paints isn't all too interesting. I honestly think the toughest mechanic, and it's not even like it's a tough one, I just think that with everything else that's going on, it's probably the mechanic that leads to a lot of wipes as groups are getting used to it, are those Reapers that follow the healers. They basically have to look at the Reaper to stop it from moving, but the Reaper is coming from a direction that if you look at it, there's a gaze attack that'll kill you. And if the Reaper gets too close, it also kills you. So you basically need to kite it around the outside and then look at it while looking away from the gaze attack as well. It's not like it's a difficult mechanic, but I think that people getting used to it for their first time are they're likely to die, and I think it's within reason that they die to a mechanic like that. But other words, I mean, I don't know. Without the need for positionals, without the need to position the boss, even with the double auto attacks, I feel that because the use of the paint wasn't creative enough, it just led to this fight definitely feeling easier than O2 Savage for me. And if not for certain little things, such as the double auto attacks, as well as mechanics that may be difficult or more difficult to figure out for the first time for specific roles, that it might have also been easier than O5 Savage. It was real close to earning the easier than O5 Savage thing. I have a feeling with a lot of gear, we'll be skipping some of the later repeats of the phases, and the margin for error on this fight is going to be much higher, much higher than almost all of the other fights in the raid tier. So O6 Savage, it's a good fight, but in terms of raw difficulty, the difficulty doesn't match up to the enjoyment level of the fight itself. So I think I could have done a better job with the paints, and that would have definitely improved the experience overall with this encounter right here. So moving on to the next one. Now the next one is the first really big one we need to talk about, because this one is O7 Savage. And everyone's comparing it to O3 Savage, which was generally agreed to be a really good fight in the first Deltascape tier. It had a pretty large spike in difficulty. It had some good mechanics, some solid reactions, and everything came together really well in the last phase of that encounter, plus some new things got thrown into the mix. So does O7 Savage match up to O3 Savage? I think it does. I think overall, this is the harder encounter between this and O3 Savage. The Guardian himself has just enough randomness without really being random, I suppose. You can pretty much always know, based on a certain pattern that's being executed on the fight, what the pattern for almost the entire fight is going to be. You can pretty reliably see, okay, we're going to get this guy's mechanic next, and this guy's mechanic third, and this guy's mechanic fourth. As soon as you see the first pattern or two, you should be able to figure out the rest. That being said, each of the patterns was unique, it was different, and figuring them out individually and making sure to have the attention span to memorize where you were in the boss's mechanics was something that I felt was a welcome change to, hey, you know, this, then this, then this, then this, and that's all. We basically looked at the screen there, we saw what mechanic was coming next, we worked on a strat for this, and then we kind of know the next one he's gonna skip. And now from this point on, we can start planning for the rest of the fight. We can plan out our cooldown usage. We can plan out our actual execution of the mechanics. And it was a fun fight, and it was well put together. I think that in terms of everything, the places where people can screw up and cost you portions of the fight that'll wipe you, I think that this is harder than 03 Savage. So I think this is going to be one of the most fun encounters that people will probably enjoy going back to in this raid tier, especially with these turtle speed missiles. You think there's no way it's possible you could get hit by those missiles. You realize really quickly that somebody's going to get hit by those missiles most of the time. I also think each of the ads here was well done. They basically introduce an ad to pick up for the off-tank, which becomes the off-tank's primary responsibility in this fight. That's one thing that really hasn't been talked about much is tank swaps really haven't been much of a thing in this raid tier. Instead, there's a lot of aggro resets and a lot of reasons to manipulate enmity with things like Shirk, and less rely on the use of things like Shadewalker and Smoke. For ads like this, and for aggro resets, Shadewalker and Smoke are great, but if there's no tank swap required, the tank tools like Shirk become just as valuable as the Shadewalkers and the diversions. So I think that's an important thing to consider when looking at all of the fights that I really haven't mentioned thus far, is because there's not really any, the tank swaps are super limited in a sense, I suppose. There are ways to use them that are less straightforward that could be beneficial to the group, such as a tank getting a mechanic that they may want to move away from the group from, and then tank swapping so that they can move away from the group. But there's also positions you can take where that's not even necessary. So I think that's another important thing to consider with the difficulty and with the fun of these encounters, is they feel less, I guess, restricted by the meta. It doesn't feel like the meta really carries these fights as hard as people like to say that they do. That's usually the case, but it's more so here because they're letting other enmity tools and other tools that you have be of more use in general. So Guardian, overall, I think they did a phenomenal job at this fight. I think the problem most pugs are going to have is what's called the virus program, which I'm going to try to skip ahead to right now. I'll be going over this in the guide, obviously, but the virus program is basically just, it's A3 Savage Ferrofluids. It's don't stand away from other people if you're marked with abandonment. And it's Allegan Rot. It's called Ether Rot here, but that's the one thing I'm afraid of in pugs is Ether Rot. Is groups doing that correctly. So this is when you see it right here. We're all kind of loosely spread, and then, you know, we have the two ferrofluids go to each of the corners, and then the tank and the healer ferrofluid goes to the north. And then you have all those people in the center of the room. One of them's got rot, and then they got to get spread apart. This will be really easy to do once it's explained to you and you're kind of seeing it all in practice. But I think, again, it's a very well put together mechanic that feels within reason to control. It feels like something I haven't been asked to do in a raid in quite some time, especially when we get to the viral program. And ultimately, Guardian feels like every mechanic you've ever seen where you go, wow, I wonder why they've never used that in a raid before. And then all of a sudden, they use it in a raid. Like, coming up right here is Viral Weapon, which I'm going to fast forward to a little bit, which is the little, you know, the little cursor over your head that determines your direction from the last boss of Rabanastre. They put that in here, and you have to, as a raider, now have the skill to utilize this thing in such a way that doesn't wipe the group. And I think it's good. I think it's an interesting use of the mechanic that is on a far more punishing level than that of something like a 24-man raid. So it's one of the few times I've welcomed a mechanic from a 24-man raid and been like, you know what, that was a solid addition to the 8-man raid version. I have to talk about this fight a lot more in detail to cover everything, but better than 03 Savage and harder than 03 Savage, I feel. And now we move on to 08 Savage. Now, 08 Savage is the one that's, I guess, the biggest, gonna come down to preference, in my opinion. So we're gonna compare the first 4 minutes of the fight with Kefka here to the first 4 minutes of the fight with Xdeath. Basically, these guys are gatekeepers to the true bosses. And you need to beat them within a very strict DPS limit, especially for the first week, in order to actually move on to the real encounter. So, first of all, I'd like to apologize to anyone watching this. We use what's called the line strat here on Kefka. I told my raid team, and I think most of my raid team agreed, that this is a terrible strategy for this encounter. So I apologize for using A, B, C, and D like that. Use a box. Don't use a line. Make a box with them around the center of the room. It's so much easier for the mechanic that's coming up later. So with Kefka, is he easier or harder than Xdeath to get into Neo Xdeath? There's no black holes, but I found that people learning to do the question marks properly was, I guess we call it the bamboozle or the fake. And then we have nicknames for each of the individual faked mechanics. He can basically do a mechanic that's telling the truth or it's lying. Almost like, again, the last boss of Ravenaster. If you see him do a mechanic and it has no question marks, then he just wants you to do the mechanic honestly. But you can see right here, there's question marks flying around him. And that means he actually wants you to do the mechanic wrong. Because if you do the mechanic right, it's actually going to hit you. So things like that can definitely throw people more for a loop, I feel, than, Blizzard 3 or Fire 3s from Xdeath. It's somewhat reliable, and you do get used to it eventually, but your spatial awareness for this fight does have to be pretty good. I just think the fact that there's no black holes takes away from a lot of what is expected of you here. So this was the thing we did the line thing for, and I think this might actually be the toughest thing about Kefka versus what was tough about Xdeath, is that during his downtimes, he's kind of just laughing in your face, by the way, but there's always some sort of mechanic you can solely focus on without DPSing, but at the same time, it's a mechanic that comes and is different every time. There's no like, hey, here's the black hole phase the second time, and the only difference is Blizzard 3, Fire 3. There's a different mechanic for each of those things where he disappears, and you need to be paying attention to the Tower of Gods in the back. A lot of people like to focus on a boss. They're not thinking about something that's in the background of the fight, and that plays into the difficulty for encounters a lot. So I'd say he's about even with Xdeath, but for completely different reasons. This was a really enjoyable fight. I actually really enjoyed the initial Xdeath as well. I think the only thing this reminds me of is that normal mode felt super incomplete for Kefka. I just think that it's well put together. It's put together in a fun and enjoyable way that as you learn it and as you stop falling for Kefka's tricks and you start being able to identify which mechanic is coming out of the tower and when, it becomes a much more enjoyable encounter. So Kefka versus Xdeath, I'd say they're about even, but I think the real question most people have is about Neo Xdeath and God Form Kefka. So let's jump into that. So after you defeat Kefka, just like with Xdeath, you go into God of Magic Kefka as the actual final boss of 08 Savage. You do get a checkpoint after you defeat Kefka. However, you have to re-defeat him anytime you re-enter the instance. So part of progression on this fight becomes making sure you don't re-wipe to Kefka over and over again in a lockout to make sure that you have enough time to actually progress on God Kefka himself. So God Kefka, I am having a tough time determining how I feel about him versus Neo Xdeath. I keep going back and forth between, and sorry that you can hear LA being really loud outside. I keep going back and forth. Is he harder than Neo Xdeath? Is he easier? Let's just play the video. So there's two major things you need to watch out for on God Kefka. The first one is called Forsaken, and the second one is called Trine. And those mechanics, individually, I guess, they're very complicated to figure out because they're very weird. He doesn't do the whole tricky thing anymore where he reverses abilities and makes the fake ones the real ones and the real ones fake ones. But his mechanics still have really weird attributes about them. The Trine one is an example of a mechanic that we were like, oh, it's just like Titan Bombs. And then it ended up still murdering us repeatedly because we tried to treat it like a Titan Bomb and not like I guess, not like a different attack, because it doesn't function entirely like those Titan bombs from back in the days. I'd say the big thing about this fight is this boss needs to be moved. This boss has auto attacks. I think that's something that I almost hit on with Chatternook, but I didn't really hit upon it with, I guess, I didn't really talk about it as much as I would have liked to. But a large element of the difficulty in Kefka is not his direct mechanics. A big difference between him and Neo Exdeath is that this guy needs to be positioned properly, and he auto attacks the tanks while they're doing things like moving around for mechanics, or just in between other things like tank busters. You know, there can be an auto after the tank buster here. There can be an auto after the shared tank buster. There can be auto attacks while you're trying to heal the party. And I think that's one of the most basic mechanics that doesn't get any respect as a mechanic in an encounter. So that's the big thing that makes me go back and forth between if Kefka is harder or easier than Neo Exdeath. I felt that like Grand Cross and Grand Cross Omega and Delta Attack and all those things, I feel like individually those mechanics may have been more difficult, especially when I think to Celestriad. Celestriad is his basically Delta Attack equivalent, where he uses all his elementals from his first phase at once. And I think Delta Attack is the harder of the two. I think that the Grand Crosses are far more punishing the screw up than a Forsaken, especially once we have enough item level and the DPS down in this fight isn't severe enough to warrant, oh, well, we screwed up a tower, that means we're going to wipe the fight. Whereas if somebody screws up like a Grand Cross Alpha and a Grand Cross and like 4 people get knocked off the arena, that's a lot worse, I feel. So I'm really torn on God Kefka. Like, I'm really, really torn on it. This is the Trine right here, where the AoEs actually come out of the points of the triangle and not from the triangles themselves. So each one triangle is 3 AoEs. And getting the spatial awareness for that down actually ended up being one of the more difficult aspects of the encounter. I will say, though, that as like any week 1 encounter, you know, mistakes on simple things like the Trines or the Forsakens do lead to big wipes. But with more gear, I feel like we'll definitely be able to overcome that. I'm going to say that I think in terms of punishing for doing mechanics wrong, Kefka's way easier. But I think on healers, this is the infinitely harder fight between the two. I know Almagest is a big, big factor when talking about that, and that's a tough one. You know, I've never had to heal Almagest. You know, I've never had to heal tanks through the Almagest dot plus a tank buster. But I feel that the constant, you know, the bleed on the one mechanic, and there's the shared tank busters, and there's vulnerability stacks that can fly around if you do mechanics wrong, and there's healing reductions that can fly around if the healers. I think there's enough different things going on here that demand split attention from the party, and there's very few, like, I guess, long stretches of, hey, you know, there might be damage going out, but I don't really need to focus on healing right now. That I'd say that the healing aspect of this fight might be more difficult than Neo Exdeath. I'm gonna seed trying to say one is better than the other, and I'm gonna say it's very similar to, I guess, the first part. It's as difficult for different reasons, and I'm really trying to ignore the fact that I don't want to compare it to Ultimate at all, because of Ultimate, like, Raiders have gotten even better. Raiders were already really good when Deltascape came out. Raiders have gotten even better now that Ultimate's been out, and even if you didn't clear it, even getting through a substantial portion of it largely increases your ability to do fights like this. So that does play a little factor in it. The fact that it took as long for Kefka to be defeated as Neo Exdeath, with the extra skill of Ultimate being involved, it is a testament that, you know, I guess maybe the raid teams that survived Gordius and Midas probably are still around, and they developed those skills more so back then than they did directly through Ultimate. But they're close. They're close for different reasons. And I think I'm just gonna go with they're about equal. That's it. There's such different fights, and they require different mindsets and different skill sets and different forms of spatial awareness, that I'd say that they're equal. I'm gonna give it 08 Savage and 04 Savage are equals in my opinion. So I know that's not an entirely dedicated response. It's probably not the one you were exactly looking for, but I don't see any reason why if you did one, you couldn't do the other, ultimately. And I think that's going to be, I think the big factor really is looking at the next Ultimate tier, or even looking at the previous Ultimate tier, and trying to prepare yourself for those if you really want to look for something that's on the next level of difficulty. But anyway, those are my thoughts on all the individual encounters, how they stack up. Oh, by the way, and this one was super enjoyable. I had a lot of fun figuring out and executing on Kefka. Although I think the DPS's role in this fight, outside of just doing DPS, might be a little too easy. So that's going to be a wrap. I'm starting to get a little bit of a congested nose, so I want to clear up before I start working on some other stuff. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share, and stay tuned. We will have 2 versions of guides coming out. One kind of like a walkthrough, almost kind of like what I started doing here, but like actually going more into detail, stopping the fight, talking about healing requirements, tank requirements, stuff like that of the individual aspects of the fight. We're going to be doing those, and then we're also going to be doing the actual structured guides once once I've gotten the time to actually get footage that doesn't look like this on your screen. So anyway, thank you for watching. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share. I will see you all in the next video. Twitch stream, I'm going to do some stuff with you guys right now. So YouTube side, I will see you guys next time. Until then, take care. All right. That's good.